21st century. This is where AI sits. Cyber-physical systems have AI at their heart. They are basically physical objects powered by artificial intelligence. So we're talking about autonomous vehicles, drones, robots, smart buildings, smart elevators. At the moment they're all discrete things, but they are rapidly becoming a single set of things. And they raise, like I said, 5 questions. The first one of which is really obvious. Are those things really going to be autonomous? People talk about autonomous vehicles all the time, but are they really autonomous? And if so, what do we actually mean by that? Are they really running around with complete free will? Because here's the problem in English. I say autonomous, and you immediately think, ooh, self-aware. And it's a quick dance from self-aware to conscious, to sentient, to death. Because somehow we go from things being autonomous to the Terminator. Remarkably quickly. We get from self-driving cars to kill John Connor. If you're the right age. If you're not, I can't help you. Maybe kill the doctor. There's probably a few others. But in our heads, we hear the notion that if the machinery is autonomous, no good will come of it. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that, right? To make a machine autonomous, a machine that can act without reference to pre-written rules, you need all that artificial intelligence technology I was talking about. You also need to decide what you actually mean by autonomous. There are probably 6 or 7 experiments going on in American and global companies at the moment about autonomous vehicles. So effectively something with wheels, not always a car, but something with wheels that is moving without a human driver. Now, they're all architected really differently. They do different kinds of things. They have different ways of being autonomous. The reality is this is actually an open question. Do these systems need to be that way? Do we want humans in the loop? How far do we want humans in the loop? Which humans? And more importantly, it turns out, autonomy is kind of a cultural thing. Autonomy is different in some places than others. What it means to grant something the room to act on its own actually has cultural implications. Best example I can give you, there was a large European car manufacturer who was testing autonomous vehicles here in Australia. They had done all the things you would need to do to have a car acting autonomously, including modelling all the hazards by the side of the road. Because one of the ways autonomous vehicles work is they need to be able to determine all the dangers around them, right? The people dangers, the other car dangers, the wildlife dangers. And this particular company had modelled the wildlife. So far so good. Lots of things by the side of the road, you don't want to hit them. They had modelled all the wildlife using a 4-legged creature. So far so good, lots of things by the side of the road that are living are 4-legged creatures. And this particular 4-legged creature was a good model for cows, horses, donkeys, camels, goats, sheep, dogs, cats. Not fabulous for wombats, but still okay. Because here's how it works. An autonomous vehicle is very simple. It looks at the horizon and then it detects anything between you and the horizon, and if there's anything between you and the horizon, it slows down, the way a human driver would. So far so good. So you're looking for something that is, in fact, including the horizon. Okay, that's great. The nice thing about anything that walks with 4 legs is that when it gets between you and the horizon, you know it's going to continue to go between you and the horizon in an orderly manner. How many of us in this room are Australians? Kiwis would count. I'll grant you, I'm going to license you in on this one. Australians in the room? Oh, come on, you know what the problem is. Like, pick the one object that we have by the side of the road that doesn't follow those rules. You know what it is. Yeah, well, it turns out this particular vehicle ran into a lot of them. Because, bounce, here, bounce, gone, horizon clearly visible, kangaroo evaporated. Now, if you're a human being, you know a kangaroo that comes up will surely come down. If you were this vehicle in the first pass, you did not know that at all. All you knew is that the horizon was clear again. Not good. So it turned out how things are autonomous matters. Who's granting them autonomy, how it's granted, who's making those decisions, all a huge part of the puzzle. Second set of questions about these cyber-physical systems, about this world made big by AI, is what I call the nature of agency. And by this I mean, well, okay, so the thing's allowed to act. What are the rules? Like, most of us in this room are autonomous creatures, but we know there are rules. There are written rules, there are laws, there are conventions, there are the things you know you do and don't do. Apparently you will have fun here, but you will not leap into the swimming pool. Those are rules, they're probably conventions, they're not yet laws, but we know how to operate with all of those things, right? They're controls and limits. In order for these cyber-physical systems to have those, someone is going to have to decide what those rules are, how to program them, and under what circumstances they need to be utilised. So let's go back to that example of an autonomous vehicle. All right, I'm going to put your hands up just one more time, I promise. How many of you have driven in Melbourne? Okay, good. The rest of you are not going to have any idea what I'm talking about, but let's pretend. So in Melbourne, there is a very particular way of navigating traffic in the central business district. It is called a hook turn. It is a thing that is unnatural. And I say this as a child of Victoria. It is a thing where you turn right across multiple lanes of traffic and find yourself briefly having a moment of going, oh my God, I'm going to die. And if you're not from Victoria, you are convinced, in fact, that that is in fact what is going to happen. If you fail to do this, that's actually more deadly than if you do. Now imagine we need to teach an autonomous vehicle to do a hook turn. I think there's a preceding question about whether they will ever be willing to learn, because I don't actually think this is rational activity. But if you taught that autonomous vehicle to do a hook turn, it now has a set of rules that it can operate in Melbourne. You do not want that autonomous vehicle doing a hook turn in Sydney or Brisbane, where it would cause chaos. You don't want it doing a hook turn in Wagga, where it would just be subject to scorn. Or possibly Wellington, where I don't know what would happen, but I know it wouldn't be good. So, now you have to have a car that has multiple sets of rules. Melbourne rules, Victoria rules, New South Wales rules, and it has to know when to change between them. And someone has to decide who does that rule work, how it's distributed, how it's updated, whether those rules are Australian rules, Kiwi rules, American rules. How those get built into the systems turns out to be incredibly difficult. Hard to secure them, harder to make them transparent and clear, and if you build them into a system, who's going to update them? Big questions, right? Third set of questions are about what I call assurance, because sitting underneath assurance is trust, reliability, security, privacy, ethics, explicability, and manageability. It's easier to say assurance than all of those words. But what I mean here is, now you are building these systems, they are running around, making decisions. How do you know they're safe? And who gets to decide what safe is? Who gets to decide what the threshold is for risk? Who gets to decide how dangerous it should be? Who is determining whether the system works? Oh, and by the way, one of the really interesting challenges sitting inside a whole lot of artificial intelligence technology is it's very hard to trace out how certain decisions were made. So now we're using systems that make decisions. They don't always know how to unpack themselves and explain it. Who are they going to have to explain it to is a good question too. So now we have this really interesting problem. We have these systems, they are moving without humans in the loop. We've given them a set of rules. How do we know they're safe? How do we make that visible? What is the moral equivalent of the L plate and P plate here that says don't get behind them when they're reverse parallel parking? At the moment, the closest there is in Silicon Valley is bumper stickers that sit on autonomous vehicles that say, this is an autonomous vehicle, which is a bit like saying, my other car has a driver. But possibly not. So now we have this problem about safety, right? How will we know that that's a system you want to adopt? How will you know it's safe for your business, for your city? How will we decide those things? Big, open questions. Fourth set of questions are, how will we measure these systems? I'm willing to bet most of you in the room have made decisions at various points about adopting new technologies, where you've worried about the price, you've worried about whether it would be more efficient than the thing you had before, does it have more memory, is it a faster system? Those are all metrics, right? They're ways we know something is good or bad. If you think back to that chart of the last 250 years, most of the ways we've measured new technologies were about whether they made us more productive or more efficient. They're pretty straightforward metrics, right? Time, money, mostly. Now imagine we have a world of a whole lot of new technologies. Is that the measure we want? Manufacturers of autonomous vehicles think it's about safety. They think it's about lower fatalities. Those aren't efficiency metrics, right? Those are about human safety. There are certainly scientists I know who are building these systems who think it's about collecting better data, who think it's about augmenting what we can do as humans. Again, that's not really an efficiency and a productivity metric. I think there's a very clear case to be made here that some of these technologies need to be thought of quite carefully in terms of how much energy they consume. I read a statistic recently that said we're at a point in 2018 where 10% of the world's energy budget is spent on data farms. That's a lot of energy to power the cloud. And now imagine we're talking about a whole lot more technology that requires a whole lot more energy. How do we want to think about requiring that these systems be power efficient, not necessarily time efficient, would be a different calculation. And who gets to ask what the metric should be, right? Where are the people who are saying, well, I don't want it to be more productive if it spends more energy, or I want there to be a trade-off between when the humans are in the loop and when the humans aren't. Those are all metrics, and as citizens, as consumers, as customers, we could have a say in shaping and influencing what those metrics were as the systems were being built. And then last but by no means least, it's always good to have a Furby in your presentation. Once again, it's just a marker that I'm old. Sad. Here's the thing. Most of us in this room grew up with computers, one way or another. Some of us are old enough that we grew up with laptops and desktops. Some of us, it was always in a smartphone. But we've grown up with computers. We know how to interact and intersect with them. Screen, keyboard, gestures, voice. It's pretty narrow. It's pretty simple. At the moment, we are dragging metaphors from all those previous regimes into this current one. We have keyboards which are left over from typewriters. We have the little icon for save that is a disk that no one under the age of 30 knows what that actually is. We have file folders, who knows what they are. I mean, God knows. We are dragging a whole lot of language with us that it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Now imagine dragging that into a world of systems, where those systems aren't necessarily us or owned by us, but they're things we live in, we are being driven around in, we are moving in. I can guarantee you do not want a world with some of the ways we interact with computing being the next instantiation. You do not want to have to get into an autonomous vehicle and in order to make it operate, remember what 12 to 14 character, uppercase, lowercase, hexadecimal and 3 alphanumeric character password you need to operate that system. You don't. But how we will operate these systems, how we will engage with them, what they will know about us, how they will talk to each other, are all huge open questions. Do we want to talk to those systems? Well, I guarantee you, most of you in this room have typed something into Google or a chat sec or something recently. Imagine everything you typed on a keyboard this week and then think about saying it out loud. All the time, wherever you are. And you suddenly realise voice may not be good in public because an entire room full of people talking to the elevator would be distracting. An entire room full of people saying camera, now, photograph, post would just not be the look, right? And some of it's going to happen as if by magic. Some of these systems are going to work without us even knowing they are. And how that feels is an interesting question too, right? I said one of the things about that original chart that troubles me is there's no humans in the loop. One of the challenges about the way we sometimes talk about the future is there's no humans in it either. And one of the conversations we aren't so good at having is the conversation that says, what's it going to feel like in a world where technology is making decisions that we're used to making? Some things we're willing to give up. There probably aren't that many of us in the room left who remember the difference between a manual choke and an automatic choke. I'm perfectly happy to give that back to the car as something the car can think about and I do not have to. Most of us are probably ambivalent about certain things about our mobile devices, but you wouldn't want them anywhere away from you. You don't want to have to know how to use a map if it will just tell you where to go. Some of those things we've been happy to give up because they augment things we weren't good at. But imagining a world where machines are doing things we're used to thinking we are good at, or doing things around us that are no longer visible to us, I guarantee you that's going to create a degree of anxiety and a degree of a series of questions we will need to ask ourselves about what makes ourselves human, about what makes us who we are and how all of that works. So I said at the very beginning that I came back to Australia because I wanted to get something done. And Fenella introduced me and said I didn't like the word futurist, and here's the reason why. I'm not interested in talking about the future, I'm interested in building the future. My mum was always really clear. You had to build the better world if you wanted to live in it. And the thing I know about the future is if we're not building one we want to live in, then we're stuck with other people's ideas of that, and I'm not very interested in that. So when I came home 2 years ago, I came home to the Australian National University. And I came home at the request of the Vice-Chancellor of the Australian National University, the head of CSIRO, and the Dean of Engineering at the ANU. And I came home because they promised they'd give me the space to do something, well, I think they thought insane. I'm just going to go with ambitious. Because I look at all of this and I say, we had engineers and electrical engineers and computer scientists, what do we have next? It can't just be about adding ethics to computer science. It can't just be about all the tools we already have. I think we need something profoundly different. And so I came home to do that. I came home to build the next academic discipline, to build the next applied science, the next branch of engineering. I came home to make whatever it is that answers those 5 questions and helps us manage cyber-physical systems. So while this is really cheeky, because all of you have jobs and you shouldn't be doing mine, here's the thing. I committed to build something new at the Australian National University. I committed to build the thing that manages all of that. But here's what I know from 20 years in Silicon Valley. You never build things like this by yourself. We tell the story that suggests it got built by themselves. But the reality is everyone always had people who helped. And I need help. I want to take that task on, building that new applied science. I need everyone's help. And here's the help I need specifically right now. As of Monday, so 2 days ago, I convinced the Australian National University to let me take my first students. I'll take 10 students next year, fully funded scholarship for a master's degree, 1 year, with me and my team. And I need to find 10 students from around the world. You don't need to have a background in computer science, you don't need a background in engineering, you just need an honours degree, and if you don't have an honours degree, you just need to explain to me why what you've done is worthy. I want 5 years of experience beyond that degree, and I want people who want to build something, who want to work collaboratively, who are committed to changing the world, and have just a slight orientation to risk. Because clearly, this is a risky proposition. If you go to our website, you will find an application pack there. I know all of you are committed to what you are doing, but I'm willing to bet all of you know someone who might want to come and do something new. So that's my request. To build a future you want to live in, you have to put a stake in the ground. That's my stake in the ground. I hope that some of you think that is interesting. I trust that all of you will look at that and think, yeah, cyber-physical systems, artificial intelligence, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now, this will be the shape of our world. So help me build one we want to live in. Thank you.